Welcome to Let's Talk Para, the podcast where we talk about all things para sport. I'm Yasmina Isa, a para badminton player, and I'm thrilled to bring you inspiring stories from athletes, coaches, researchers, and everyone shaping the para sport movement. If you're passionate about para sport or just hearing about it now, join me each episode as we delve into the world of para sport. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk Para, and today's episode is with George Bates. George is a British former wheelchair basketball player. He played professionally in Italy and Spain as well as England. He's been part of the GB team and was able to claim many titles. Currently, George Bates is the head coach of the Lightning wheelchair basketball women's team at Loughborough University. I actually had the privilege of going to a few of the games, and the atmosphere is always just amazing. And I've been able to speak to George on many occasions. So George, without further ado, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So let's take it back to the very beginning. Could you tell me a bit about how you got your disability and growing up?
Yeah, so I was a really kind of sporty kid, played football, cricket, golf, and then when I was 11 I was at football training and I basically tried to block a football and twisted my ankle, landed on it funny, and that led to me to develop a condition called complex regional pain syndrome, which is a long fancy name for basically my brain is stuck sending messages that my left leg's in pain all the time when it shouldn't. Doctors don't really know kind of how it happens. It just normally stems from a trauma or an injury or a surgery or something. And yeah, so I got my disability through that, and that meant for me that all sport had to stop.
And when you were diagnosed, how did you personally take it and how did your family take it?
It actually took about 18 months to be diagnosed. So with my condition, you kind of need it to be diagnosed really quickly to have a full recovery prospect. So we spent about 18 months having no idea what was going on with me. I was in pain all the time. I was basically wheelchair bound, couldn't even wear a sock because the pain in my foot was that bad. So I took it really, really rough as a kid. Really kind of struggled to deal with it, and I had real kind of suicidal problems as a child. Being that age, you tend to, that's where you're allowed out and start to explore and go out with friends and things like that. And that was kind of off the cards because I couldn't even get out of bed. I think it was probably harder looking back now on family rather than me. I was going through it, but they had to kind of, a dad now, having to watch your child go through it, I think would be even worse. So I really, really struggled with it and kind of just became a bit reclusive and didn't really do anything from then on. And
did you go to school while you were?
Yeah, so I was 11 years old, so I must have been in high school for me, year 7, year 8, and so my attendance dropped to probably about 20%, 30%.
Oh wow, yeah.
Basically wasn't going to school because I physically couldn't get out of bed to go into school. My kind of, if I did go into school, there's always the classic. I think it's a bit better now, but if we had PE, I'd get bunged in the library for a few hours to basically sit and do nothing, which obviously isn't great as a kid. And I mean, I didn't know anyone with a disability at that point from maybe grandparents or older people, so I kind of was really worried as an 11-year-old about my future prospects of, am I going to have a job, am I going to have a family, am I going to get married? I don't know anyone disabled, what's my life going to be? So I kind of really struggled to deal with that. And my brothers were getting older and playing sport, and so I have 2 younger brothers, but they were getting older and I couldn't play in the garden with them and do the things that my dad and family were doing as much. So it was pretty rough.
Wait, so you went to school in a wheelchair then? Yeah,
so either in a chair or with 2 crutches. So at that point I was either I was in a chair for a little bit and then with 2 crutches and kind of holding my leg up and not really using it. And the way we kind of got around that was I was at physio and in hospital 5-6 times a week. My mum, my dad worked away, so it was basically my mum's responsibility to look after 3 kids and then take me to all my doctor's appointments pretty much every day. So fair play to her.
Shout out to your mum.
Yeah, shout out to my mum. We did that for 4 or 5 years as well. It was really long process, and it eventually, I guess, kind of got me to a point now where I use 1 crutch.
Was the school quite supportive? Obviously I know a lot of disabled students or in school, they're not able to participate in PE, but were they quite accommodating?
I'd say so. They had no issues with me not attending and stuff. They knew kind of what was going on. I think they made it so I could leave like classes like 5 minutes earlier so I could get to my next class and things like that. So I'd say they were accommodating. It was just the classic, what do we do with a disabled kid when PE's on, which I think is better now. This was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
For me,
I mean, I've heard stories and I think it's a lot better now.
But still maybe not all the way there yet.
I think it really does depend on the school and how lucky you are. And I don't think the time period, I think it's the school and
true.
how well people are educated on it.
And if they've had someone with a disability before, right? So they kind of know the process and stuff that they need. Yeah,
because I think when you see someone with a disability, your go-to is, we shouldn't let them do anything. We don't want to hurt them or anything. So
there's the health and safety. The health and safety
risk assessment's going at.
That's a 4 on the old risk assessment.
But no, definitely. So obviously that period was quite tough for you, and then after that, wheelchair basketball was the thing that really shifted. So how did you get into wheelchair basketball?
So it was kind of at like one of my hospital appointments. So for context, I was probably about 18 months, 2 years into my disability. And I was, as I kind of just touched on, like a bit of a recluse. I'd put on a load of weight. I was just miserable. And my mum kind of was like, you need to do something. You can't just sit in your room all day. So we were at a hospital appointment and there was a poster for like a have a go day at my local wheelchair basketball team, which is Leicester Cobras. So shout out to those guys. And I didn't want to go. I really didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be in a wheelchair. As I said, like I didn't know anyone in a chair. And I was so against it, but my mum kind of like forced and dragged me to go to this taster day. So I begrudgingly went to it and I really enjoyed it. I felt kind of a bit, I guess free is probably the right word. Like I couldn't run, but I could finally move quicker than using 2 crutches or being in like a day chair.
Yeah.
So it was quite freeing to do that. And I was meeting people that had way worse disabilities than me. And for me, I guess I'd seen that they have a normal life, which I'd never really seen before. This is obviously pre-London where parasports and all those things kind of really took off in this country. So yeah, it kind of was really freeing, and they, must have been year 13, they asked if I wanted to train with them properly, like once a week with like their second team, their development team, and I was kind of a little bit against it because there was a stigma for me as a 13-year-old of being in a chair that I hadn't broken, but my mum and family encouraged me to do it, so I kind of bit the bullet and said, yeah, all right, I'll do it.
Was that you kind of accepting your situation? Because I think between 11 and 13, it was kind of, I don't want to be associated.
Yeah, it's not being associated. I just didn't envision myself as like being disabled forever, because I hadn't been diagnosed really, and all those things. I didn't know what the time scale and stuff was. And after about 18 months, 2 years, where I'd started to play wheelchair basketball at that point, is when I got diagnosed, because we went privately through healthcare because we weren't getting anywhere. And they basically told me at this point that it was going to be like a lifelong condition, which was rough to accept. But I was kind of, I guess, a little bit glad that that little bit of hope wasn't there, because that's the bit that kind of kills you, that you never know I might get better. And so it kind of meant I have got a disability, and now I found this sport that I'm enjoying and playing. So it kind of made it a little bit easier, more complete, I guess, because that's how life was going to be now. So
for those 18 months, a part of you was holding out hope.
Yeah, 100%.
Were your parents the same, or were they doing it more on the down low, like not trying to?
So I actually have quite a lot of stuff blocked out from my childhood, I think, just as a coping mechanism from like the pain and what I went through emotionally and mentally. But I think there wasn't much talk of like, you're going to get better. It was, every day, can we get a little bit better? Like that type of feeling. Then you're going to have some bad days and we've got to deal with that, but can we keep going to the doctors and keep improving instead of taking 10 steps with a crutch? Maybe it's 12 and that's a positive. I've been in the pool doing hydrotherapy for like 20 minutes instead of 15, and how I've reacted the next day. So it was more kind of just like, how can we get a little bit better each day? Not you're going to get better and you're going to be fine, because I think there was a point where my parents probably realised, and they'd done enough research themselves, that we're kind of past the point of no return here, so we need to get as good as we can. And
I think in a way also they wanted to save you from, like, they didn't want to tell you that they've probably done a lot more research.
Yeah, I think they knew. I always remember going to the doctors and the private appointment, and she was a specialist in like pain management and chronic conditions. Her saying like, yeah, it's probably going to be forever. And my mum didn't really bat an eyelid. I think she probably knew, and I was a bit like kind of taken aback, like, oh God, okay, this is interesting.
How did your brothers like go about it?
I mean, I was 11, so they'd have been about 7 and 5, so they were quite young. I feel like I was pretty horrible to my middle brother. I was struggling to deal with my disability, and I feel like I maybe was really harsh on him at times, and that was my kind of snapping and getting it out of my system. But they were really good. Like, they were super proud of me playing wheelchair basketball when I started it. They loved it. Obviously, they were 7 and 5, so sitting in a chair pushing around to them was just like the best novelty ever. So they used to come and watch, and like we tried as best we could to play football. So I'd play football with like 2 crutches in the garden, and like we'd still do all that type of stuff. But I feel like I was really harsh to my middle brother, and yeah, if he listens to this, I'll say sorry. Say sorry to him for that.
Yeah. So now that you after you got into wheelchair basketball, could you talk me a bit through how you went from being an amateur to a professional?
I think I was always an amateur. So, yeah, I started playing when I was about 13, and eventually kind of went through the classification process, which is obviously quite important in wheelchair basketball, and got classified, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit later. Got classified, and then I eventually worked my way into the GB under-22 team, and in that we went to the under-23 European Championships, so Europeans is under 22, Worlds is under 23s, because it allows a year period, because if you've qualified and you were old, you then wouldn't be eligible if it was under 22 to compete. Okay. So it's a workaround for if you can qualify, you can compete in it. Went there, I actually went out there thinking I was like really, really good, because I'd done really well in England, and I kind of got schooled and had lessons taught to me by a load of other nations and big players. And we came 4th, so that was a real learning curve. I realised I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
That was 4th worldwide?
Yeah, we came 4th, so we lost the bronze medal game to Australia, and I spent a lot of time on the bench, and I wasn't good enough at that point. I thought I was, but it was, a reality check for me. The following year, we won the under-22 European Championships, and I actually played quite a pivotal role. After that, I managed to get a contract abroad to Italy, so I moved to Sardinia when I was like 20, 21, which was, which was really quite nice. All my friends were going to uni, and they were in student accommodation, student digs, and I had an apartment on the beach, playing basketball, which was really cool. And at that point is where I kind of first started getting invited and being part of the men's team, so the senior team, GB team. So I was in that for a few years. I was in Italy for 3 years, and in my second year in Italy, I think, is when Rio came around. So 6 months out, I wasn't very optimistic of going. I thought I was a player for the future, but I wasn't good enough to get into the team for Rio. But the season I had in Italy, which was the best league in the world at that point, was kind of unbelievable, and I was just getting better and better, and playing lots more minutes. I was top scorer in the league, so I was like beating other potential GB teammates and other competitors for certain positions. And we had a Euro Cup, which is like, I guess, the Champions League if you look at it in the equivalent to football, and there was games where I'd score like 40 points. I'd never really done that, and that was in like the best competition in our sport. So it kind of got a few months out, and I was like, oh my God, I've got to be in with a shout here. I've gone from nothing, like being nowhere near just being kind of a training partner at camps, to people are talking about you might actually go. And to cut a long story short, I didn't go. Eventually, they picked, it was kind of between me and one other person. The guy's name's Simon Munn, and he's like a legend of wheelchair basketball. He'd been to 6 Paralympics before this. He kind of single-handedly had secured funding for the sport from like 97 through to like 2008.
Oh, wow.
So like a real legend.
Yeah.
And I think I should have gone. I think a lot of people thought I should have gone, but I'm not going to hate on them not taking me. I just think I was 21 years old, had a lot of time, and he could have broken the record for the amount of Paralympics going. That being said, he was still a very good player, so it's not as if like they took him and he wasn't a good player. He still was a phenomenal player, but I missed out on that, which actually probably was the best thing that happened to my career, because I never wanted to feel as terrible as I did that summer. So there was a group of four athletes that had grown up in the under-22s and under-23s. All three of them had their meetings, selection meetings, before me, and all three of them got picked. And then I was the last meeting and didn't get picked, and I felt terrible. We were in the middle of like a 3-week trip, so we'd been to Canada and then flew straight to Lanzarote for a training camp.
Yeah.
And we got told when we landed in Lanzarote, so I had to spend 10 days in Lanzarote with those guys all being, and my friends who I was buzzing for being picked for the first time, and me not being picked.
Yeah.
Which was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. Yeah, so after that, I then went back abroad, and had another year in Italy. Then decided we were asked by the GB coach to come back to the UK because they wanted to. Sorry, I went abroad, had a season abroad, then did the European Championships, which I was picked for the men, so the first senior tournament I got picked for.
Okay.
I was towel whipping on the bench and handing out water. Wasn't really doing the role that I wanted, so I then decided to brown nose and come back and be part of the centralised programme, with kind of seeing that the World Championships were coming up in a year.
Yeah.
And came back and then went to the World Championships and became kind of an integral member of that World Championship team. Kind of top scored in most of the knockout games through to the final, and then we won the final to win the World Championships against America, who don't think had lost for about 4 years. And yeah, it's the first time we'd ever won a World Championships.
So in that period of you not being selected and then to winning the World Championship, you've obviously had to change your lifestyle completely.
Yeah.
Like, so what kind of, like, was it training more privately, a lot of gym? Like, what changes did you do?
Yeah, so I think I didn't want to leave kind of any stone unturned. So maybe there's sessions where you're tired, fatigued, and you go, but you're not really present. So
Yeah.
It was about being like in those moments there. That's what makes the difference, because every athlete goes through it, right?
Yeah.
If you train 2-3 times a day, there's gonna be points probably every week where you're like, oh god, I don't really want to be here. So it was just being focused and acknowledging those moments of like, okay, this is the time where you're gonna make the gains. And then I just kind of had a bit of a cutthroat mentality of like, I'm here and I'm here to win every session, every court session, every gym session. I'm going to get better. Whereas before it was like, I've done it. Not every session, but those tiring sessions, like, I've been and ticked it off. It was like, I'm going to be really purposeful with that. So that was probably the biggest change. And then I just probably took more responsibility for my club team and wanted to show everyone that I should have been picked, or should have played more.
I had a friend actually who recently told me something. It was like, your 100% that day doesn't necessarily, like, if you give 100% on a day, it could be 40% of your actual
day.
But if that's what you could give that day, if you give it your all, then that's all that really matters. And it does go a long way, I think.
100%, like, you can't be 100% every day. Like, it's impossible, physically impossible. So like, whatever the best is, which is what that quote is, like, whatever the best is you can give that day, can you give that? And go to sleep thinking, I did what I needed to do. That's kind of how I thought of things.
Yeah, so from not being selected to world champion.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, some could say that. But now, obviously, I think the main part of the discussion, so classification, for anyone who doesn't know, is like a major part of being a para-athlete, because every sport has different like categories, and then you're classified, and based on your classification, you're put into a category.
Yeah.
For wheelchair basketball, I'm not sure how many categories is it?
So people are ranked based on their functional mobility in the chair.
Yeah. Okay.
So it goes from 1, which is for example is like a high spinal cord break. So they have low or none, basically no core function.
Okay.
So in the chair they're not balanced particularly well.
Yeah.
And it goes up in 0.5 point increments to 4.5.
You were 4.5,
I was a 4.5, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's like partial lower limb impairment essentially. So a below knee amputee would be a 4.5 as well, because they're in a chair. They have an anchor point. They're fixed because they can push through feet, and then anywhere in between is just dependent on your function in the chair. And of those kind of that classification, each team has to add up to a maximum of 14.5 points, 14 internationally, with the 5 players that are on court.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how it makes it fair. So both teams are kind of really playing at an average because you could play a couple of really high pointers like me, but then you've got to play ones which are more severely impaired in the chair.
And I think in a way that also makes it more inclusive, because you're kind of, because a team could be like, I'm just going to get everyone 4.5s, but now you're forced to make, not forced, but you get like
to play
the ones,
me, you have to play someone more impaired.
Exactly.
It's pretty unique to probably parasport that it covers, playing the same game, it covers all ranges of disability. Whereas most, especially individual sports, for obvious reasons, they've got to have it's same impairment v same impairment of function type stuff. Anyway.
But there's always the claim of this person's too disabled for that category or not as disabled enough.
That's the
and
big
I'm guessing that leads me into obviously you were on the road to qualifying for Tokyo. And then you didn't, not because of anything.
Well, I qualified.
You qualified, but you didn't get to go. So can you tell me why you didn't get to go?
Yeah, so we qualified in 2019 at the European Championships. So I'd been to that and kind of been, again, building on the world's been a key member of that. And then I was actually sat in a restaurant in 2020 in England, and something flashed up from the Telegraph saying wheelchair basketball was going to get kicked out of the Paralympics if they didn't confine to the IPC, the Paralympic Committee's classification rules. And apparently this had been going on in the background for a long time, and the IWBF, which is the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation, had kind of disagreed fundamentally with the IPC's rules. So they'd been ignoring it.
Were you aware of that?
No one knew.
Oh, so none of the players knew? Okay.
No one knew till this article came out. And it was a day before that the IPC was going to announce that this problem had kind of happened. So I was a bit like, oh, that's kind of big news, like kicking a whole sport out of the Paralympics. And when I read into it more, I'd seen that my disability was named as one of those kind of being ineligible, because in their view, pain is subjective and it can't really be quantified. And so from that, it basically meant all 4.5 and 4 point players had to go through reclassification or eligibility check. So I did a load of tests and found that I had like lost passive range of movement, loss of kind of muscle power. So I was then like, okay, I might be all right. So I submitted it, waiting to hear back. We were due to find out in the May. Obviously, January to May 2020 is when COVID happened. So they had a lot going on. They then postponed the games and things like that, so we weren't due to find out till the June, until they'd organised what Tokyo 2021 was gonna then look like. So I waited, and day in June came around, got to about 4:00, and I hadn't heard anything. And from what I've been told, is that my kind of case file had forgot to be sent off by the IWBF to the IPC, something like that. So nobody had really looked at it and gave it a yes or no. So I then had to wait another 1.5, 2 months during lockdown, not knowing obviously if my career was gonna.
Was it just your case file,
just
or like
mine?
So of all the
GB players that had been sent off, they'd had all of them back, yes, no, or need more information.
And you were the exception.
I was the exception that I hadn't.
Little dodgy that.
Yeah, I know. Like, I genuinely think it's probably an administrative error. Because they'd sent off other people's and they'd been told that they weren't eligible, so that had already started.
Fair enough.
But obviously not ideal during lockdown and being stressed about if my career was going to continue and stuff. The day in August came round, and I got a phone call from the performance director basically saying, you're done. That's it. I think the writing was, you have a disability essentially, but not the right type of disability. It's a long-term health condition, or it's an underlying health condition, not a disability. I can't really remember the exact wording. I just remember reading it thinking, what does that even mean? I've had this condition for 20 years, so it's pretty long-term to me. So obviously I was devastated. Like, it was kind of like my goal of going to Paralympics and winning a gold medal, which was a reasonable goal for our team, being current world champions and stuff, had kind of been taken away. And I kind of did an interview with the Telegraph because they broke the story when I announced that I was kind of deemed ineligible. They got in contact and wanted to speak to me, so I had an interview with them, and I kind of woke up to like a double spread saying I was going to amputate my leg to compete, which wasn't entirely true.
I'm sure that was out of context.
Yeah, so I can provide context. So people with my disability, a lot of people get amputations because it can potentially stop the pain. It's a low percentage possibility. And when I was 14 or 15, I was offered amputation, but because I was going through such a hard time mentally, and they said that it's probably not going to stop the pain. Family were like, no, you're in a hole if we amputate and then it doesn't work, like you're going to be even
that's
worse.
Going to be worse. Yeah,
ironically.
Yeah.
I would have been able to compete if I'd have gone through that option. So they then kind of took that a little bit out of context, because they said, would you do it now? And I said, it's an option that's there for anyone with a disability. Obviously you have to go through a long process to have an amputation to make sure it's kind of the final straw. But that's not what was, I guess, a good headline. And then every other news outlet and social media and everything picked it all up, and it was
I think
crazy.
They just got you in an emotional time, and you didn't say that, but then it's the way the media works. Wanting to
and social media, like no one's going to click on it if it's just like Paralympian deemed ineligible. Paralympian who might cut his leg off to compete.
That's a more compelling story.
People are going to click on that.
Yeah.
People are going to have a look at that.
Definitely.
I thought it was good because I guess the positive side of it brought it into the light, and this affects a lot of people, not just me, like thousands and thousands of people across all the sports, which I think was good. But after 2 weeks of it being in the news, it just kind of died a death. Which is how news works. Like we're humans, we want different things, different stimulations.
Exactly. So after August, you were deemed ineligible. Yeah. Did you do anything to...
Yeah, so I was still playing in Spain. So through my testing, I'd found that I had a separate hip condition. And to appeal the decision, you have to have new evidence. And the hip condition was from how I'd walked kind of on my leg for 15 years.
Okay, yeah.
And so we went through an appeal, went through the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I'd moved back to Spain to carry on playing professionally. And at this point, my girlfriend became pregnant as well back in England, and there was still travel restrictions with COVID and stuff like that. So I had quite a stressful time going on, not knowing if I was going to have a career. My girlfriend was pregnant. I was living in Spain. She was on her own, which shout out to her, because I wouldn't be able to do that. So we went through the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and when... with that, we challenged something that was maybe not 100% strong, but was the quickest, because we needed to get it done before Tokyo was going to be in that summer. And we started this kind of legal proceeding in the January, so only 7 months out.
So that was January 2021.
2021, yeah. So went through that. I applied for legal aid within Court of Arbitration for Sport, and I got a thing back saying you could only get that if you were an Olympian. So able-bodied, and they tend to have more money than Paralympians as well. I think it was a doping offence, so I could have cheated, and
you would have had the right
to legal aid, or potentially cheated. Potentially cheated,
yeah.
And had the right to legal aid. So my lawyer straight away was like, "That's pretty discriminatory."
Yeah, was it Olympian specifically, not even Paralympian?
Yeah, it was specifically an Olympian.
That's no.
Yeah. So welcome to Parasport. So basically meant that because I didn't get that, I had to put up the money up front to cover the costs and damages for both sides, which was like £30,000 or something.
Oh wow.
And I just bought a house. As I said, my girlfriend was 6-7 months pregnant at this time. She was going to go on maternity leave. She's a strong northern woman, so she was adamant that right is right, wrong is wrong, we're going to fight it. But I kind of made the decision at that point for family of like, nah, I'm done. So I just kind of withdrew it. And that's where I retired, and kind of retired before I was pushed, essentially.
Yeah. But luckily, new opportunities opened up.
Yeah, it's very convenient.
Yeah. So where were you based at that point in time?
So at that point, I was obviously living in Spain, but I had a house in Sheffield, because when I was training, we were based at the EIS, English Institute of Sport in Sheffield. So my girlfriend's from there, and so we're thinking with having a baby and stuff like that, with family being around, it was a lot easier to be based there. I was living there. But I'm from Groby, which is about a village 10 minutes away from here in Loughborough originally. Okay. So that's where I was born. Okay. So I am a local to this area. So
after having to forced retirement, basically, how did you get into the Lightning wheelchair basketball coaching for women, which obviously is the first league in the world, professional league in the world, right?
First elite, I'd probably go with. So the girls aren't really paid. So I'd probably I'd say professional is being paid. So I think that was falsely advertised.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
But it's definitely their first like elite
league in the world,
because they have access to like S&C and all those things through all the teams do. It's like kind of franchise teams.
And also the games are quite like, well, you know, like
they're
you got
BBC
like the
you
got the hosts and you got everything. So yeah, how did you go about getting that?
So before I properly like retired, I saw there was an advert for it, so because I was panicking of if I was going to continue or not, I applied for the role. And I don't really have much coaching background. Like I was just an athlete. Just an athlete. But I thought my knowledge and my kind of name in the game was probably quite good, and I could potentially give it a bit of a crack if my legal case didn't go through. So I applied for it, and I think, if I'm being honest, I think a few people said some good things about me and said that I was a good guy and thought I'd be quite good at it. Obviously I had to then go through an interview process and submit like a year plan of what that would look like and do a coach session. I actually had to do my coach session abroad and video it and send it in because I was still competing at the time. And so I had to submit all that, do an interview, and thankfully got the role. I think they liked some of my ideas and how I saw the program going and what my kind of style of coaching is. I've had some good coaches and I've had some bad coaches, so I like to think
what works.
Yeah, I like to think that I've like molded and picked good things from the best coaches. Are just people that have picked stuff up from other really good coaches.
It's also quite impressive when you see a CV like world champion.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think it probably helps.
Yeah, you know.
That was as an athlete though. There's plenty of like other sports that
technically. You qualified for the Paralympics, so technically.
Yeah, I don't really take qualifying for the Paralympics as an athlete. Like that doesn't really mean too much to me.
World champ, I think that would that be the
world and European champion. I'll take that. I threw away all my silver medals that I've ever got. Genuinely.
Oh wow!
I've never kept them.
Yeah, I can't relate to that.
I know it's different for different things, but like as a team sport and the team we had, like it was like gold or nothing. So things like I understand like if you've worked really hard to get to a point and silver is achievement, but for where that team was at, it was gold or bust.
Gold or nothing. Yeah.
So I kind of gave all mine away.
So in terms of like when you started coaching, obviously that was your first time coaching. How was that, and just the environment? Obviously, because you've always competed with men, and then now you're coaching women. So how was that?
It was a real learning curve, a real learning curve. So I knew a lot of the girls anyway because they were part of the women's GB team. So we at training camps and things like that, like they would normally joint, like they'd train at like 9 till 11 and we'd be on at 11 till. So we kind of knew them. I found like I thought my weakest area would be like the planning element of it and being like, I've got to structure a year to make it look like I know what I'm doing. So I thought that was going to be the hardest part, but I actually really enjoyed that element. I didn't think I would. I thought I just want to be on the court coaching. And then it's just about kind of being a good person. I've always felt I've been a really good teammate, and I feel like as a coach, it's kind of your role as well. Like get to know the girls, get to know the situation, how they're feeling, how they're doing. There's certain things that I think you have to change when you're coaching women compared to coaching men. I don't think, and I'm making a broad assumption here, but a high percentage of the team don't want to be shouted and screamed at, whereas in the men's game that's pretty common, and it does tend to get the best out of a lot of people, whereas I think it can be a negative thing in women's sport, especially, well, certainly in the team that I coach. So it was learning that style of how to convey your message, but in the right way, which was I think I got it right most times.
Well, you've been quite successful for the past few years, so you gotta be doing something.
Yeah,
right.
We've won 3 out of 3 titles. We've had good teams and unbelievable players and a great group. So I've been very lucky with the people that I've got to coach. I'll take a little bit of credit, obviously, making decisions and stuff, but it's kind of with most things, like I can come up with training, come up with a plan, but when they're on the floor, it's up to them. It's up to them. Like I can't really do too much, so all the credit in my eyes does go to those girls.
Yeah. So now in terms of like, obviously you're still coaching, in terms of like looking to the future, what's next for you?
I don't really know. So I think I don't really believe in goals, so I've kind of upset my whole IDT and staff team this week by saying that I think goals are overrated, which is I know it's a bit of a hot take. I think they're important for a direction, but once you've picked the direction, I think they're irrelevant. I think the important thing is what you do day to day. So work out from that direction what you need to do, and then I never thought about winning the world. I thought I want to win the world champions and want to be a world champion. Then I never thought of it again. I worked out what I needed to do to be a world champion every day.
So it's like the tasks more,
tasks.
That's what you paid.
Because you become over focused on the goal, you can become obsessed with it, and you're missing the little things that happen day in, day out.
And I think when you have the goal, then it's like, okay, how am I going to achieve that? It seems like such a
it's too broad.
Yeah, I want to be world champion. Well, how am I going to do that? But no. So at first, I didn't know where that was going, but now I get what you mean.
I think the process and stuff is more important, and the discipline is more important. I think having a goal gives you direction, but it doesn't actually get you to the goal, an end destination. And I achieved the goal that I had, and it felt great for like 10 minutes after we won Worlds, and then it was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, you were always hungry for more.
Yeah, so I just don't. Yeah, it's a weird one. I know if they are all listening to this, I'm really sorry because they were not happy with me when I made this wild accusation.
You're like, let's go for the next one.
Yeah. So I think for me, I just want to become better and better as a coach, and see how far I can get. Yeah. If I'm improving every day, then the opportunities will arise. Yeah. I'd like to eventually go. And maybe that's the only way I can get to a Paralympics is coaching that.
That would be cool.
Which would be cool. And I think I'm at a point now where I can do that. I think for my first few years of coaching, I didn't want anything to do with the Paralympics. It was too raw, hurt too much because I should be competing. Yeah, I'm at a point now where it would be quite cool to go do that and kind of be there and make a difference that way. Do
you still play wheelchair basketball, like as a player?
Yeah, so I still play recreationally in England. I've actually... our team was the only non-professional team to get to like EuroLeague 2 finals last year, and a few of the male students and a few of the girls actually play for the team that I play at as well. So we went to Europe and we came 6th, I think, and that's the highest placed non-professional team.
So you were they were all professional?
Yeah, all the teams in Europe are pro, so they were all getting paid, and we train twice a week, if that. And they're training every day.
Fair enough.
And I've still kind of get offers from teams in Europe to go play pro again, which is quite nice for the old ego. But
you wouldn't go for it again?
I'm pretty settled with like family, and like my thought is if I go abroad, I then have to come back and find another job. Like I'm kind of set and settled. I'm not going to say never, because who knows what might happen. But
I think parasport, the thing that's different about it is you could play it to a bit older than like, whereas non-disabled sport, it's a bit different because you have to stop at a certain point, whereas with para, I think
the pool's bigger, right, in able-bodied sports, so you're kind of pushed out faster because there's more participation, I think.
Exactly. But because with para sport you're always coaching the next generation. The pool is quite small, so you could hypothetically always go
I think our prime's like 35, 36, so I've not even
that gives
I'm
me
not
hope.
even I'm not even old enough hit that yet. I'm like 5 years away from my prime.
So
maybe that's when I'll go. I don't know.
Do you know, you never know, the IPC could change the rules?
Yeah, I think they'll change the rules, but I think they'll make it so tight that it doesn't enable me and people like me to play. But then they can say, oh no, we have changed the rules. But yeah, I've kind of given up on that. I was quite optimistic for like a year or two of like, maybe they will. But now I'm at a point like, there's the hope, kind of like I said with the disability side of things, of it getting better. It's the hope that kind of kills you a bit. So I'm kind of done with expecting change.
So where do you see parasport actually going now? Like parasport in general, not just wheelchair basketball.
Obviously I have a better perception of wheelchair basketball because I'm from it. I think it's good. You're starting to see more stuff on TV. So we talked about London a little bit of like that was the real game changer.
Yeah.
Has it got much better from London? Like after the changes that were made from London, I don't really know. I think it got us to a level. I think we've kind of stayed at that level. Maybe there's a little bit more visibility, like with people going on game shows and hosts and things like that. There's a bit more visibility, maybe with like mannequins in chairs in like Nike stores and things like that. There's a little bit more visibility, but realistically, if I'm looking at the sport itself, how many sports get proper coverage other than the 4 years that with the Paralympics? Maybe athletics gets a little bit more, obviously, but there I saw is it Johnny Peacock's interview after, I don't know if it's Johnny Peacock, one of the athletes after Paris, saying that they should be in the Diamond League because they should make it like routine that parasport is seen. So there's still a bit of things there. Athletes are marketable. Like there's a lot more disability, like disabled models, like things like that, and in adverts and things, like there is a lot more. But I think for actual coverage of the sport, has that really changed that much in terms of being on television?
I don't think I think I agree with you on the coverage of sport, but it's kind of weird because the level has increased massively from London. Like from what I've seen, all the sports have become so there's a lot of professionals now within parasport, where in the past you'd view the Paralympics and you'd see it as like an amateur, not even just parasport in general. But now everyone's taking it seriously. Countries are taking it seriously. But with that, there comes the visibility still hasn't increased per se.
I think like you said, like internally, so within the Paralympics, like those smaller nations and less, like they're starting to invest more money in it. It's becoming more. They're seeing like the value that it has in society to have that, and I think people are respected more as athletes rather than, like you said, amateurs and just taking part. But in terms of like just pure coverage of sport, I don't necessarily think that's improved that much.
Yeah, no, I could definitely agree with that. I think it was only the Paralympics that I'd ever seen.
But I think the first step is just making disability more mainstream, which is what's kind of going on now.
I
so
think
it becomes more, you can't see me, but I'm going to quote normal, air quote with that. But it just, more coverage for major tournaments and events are probably what's needed next.
Would you think like merging able or like non-disabled sport and parasport together, would that?
I think it helps. I know there's some people that are like, no, it's better to be separate because you're on your own and that. But I think with crossovers, you just draw a bigger audience. Like whether there's like, let's say, I'll use basketball as an example. Let's say there was a massive basketball tournament like the European Championships or something, hosted with wheelchair basketball. People that might be coming to watch an able-bodied game of basketball might stick around and watch wheelchair basketball and be like, actually, I quite like this. This is quite fun. Like I can relate to it. I know what it is. It's basketball, but there's a different element to it. And I think because of the lack of maybe TV coverage, if you can get people that enjoy that specific sport to be exposed to it live, I think will help draw new fans in and create a demand. Yeah,
no, I definitely agree with that because we had once in para badminton, we had a like world champs that was both non-disabled and like para, and we got a crowd for like the first time, and I was like, that's quite cool.
But that's what you want.
Exactly.
Like, and I understand there's a lot of kind of politics in there between federations, and things like that, which is the sticking point. But ultimately, like anything that makes it more visible, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Now to the last part of today. So do you mind telling me 2 truths and a lie about yourself?
Yep.
And I will try to my best to guess the lie.
I feel like this one's going to be, I feel like you're going to struggle with it. So
okay, let's go. Let's hear it.
First one is I've never been to a music concert or festival in my life.
Okay.
Second one is I passed my driving test first time. And the third one is I've been chased and stopped by the armed police whilst driving.
See, they all sound very believable. Like,
what, believable? But being stopped by the armed police? I don't know.
No, well, the thing is, because that's quite specific. So I'd say that's true.
Could be a double bluff, though, yes.
Yeah, I know, it could be reverse psychology. But I'd say you're not reversing psychology, whatever, I'd say you're not doing that. I feel like there's an interesting story with the driving test. So I feel like you've probably done it 10 times or something.
10.
Not 10, but like, you failed it multiple times.
If anyone sees me driving around campus, watch out.
You got 2. Yeah, you got the police chasing after you
Yeah.
So I'd say because you didn't pass it on the first time, you got police coming after you later.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'd say the lie is the driving test.
Well done.
Really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well done, it is.
So how many times did you...
I passed second time.
Oh, that doesn't make for an interesting story.
Yeah, well, yeah, so I passed second time and I did get stopped by the armed police for mistaken viewing of CCTV footage.
Oh.
They were watching something and got the wrong end of the stick, and they got surrounded by like 8 cars with guns and stuff.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, so that didn't have to do with your lack of
No,
ability
nothing
to
to
properly
do, nothing
drive?
to do with licensing, stuff like that. Yeah, no, they basically saw the wrong thing, and apparently they were on high alert that night.
Okay.
And yeah, so they like apologised, and I got swarmed by 7 police cars with guns.
And what's the spot? So you've never been to a
Never
concert?
been to a music concert or festival.
Would you like to go to one?
Well, I'd love to go to one. So I've had tickets to go. I had tickets to Drake's tour in Europe, in Amsterdam, a few years ago, and he pulled out.
Oh.
And then I had tickets to the weekend shows here, like last year, and he pulled out of that as well. So I'm just like,
I think your luck's not quite.
Yeah, I'm just like cursed with concerts and festivals.
To be
and
fair,
stuff.
I'd not been to a lot, but I was able to secure Coldplay tickets.
Nice.
So
well done.
We'll see.
I've just given up. Like, there's no point. The 2 artists I really wanted to see have both pulled out of their tours.
Drake and The Weeknd.
Drake and The Weeknd both pulled out of their tour. And when Drake pulled out, it was actually, I saw a picture of him in Amsterdam still on a date with someone. I was like, oh man, like I should have been going.
But you know what, if this podcast makes it and they hear this,
yeah, I know,
this is their call. This is like they're obligated to get you free tickets.
I'm shouting them out, calling them out for their poor etiquette.
Yeah, but George, thank you so much for joining me today, and people could follow you on Instagram probably to see some live updates.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
But yeah, thank you for having me. No, not thank you for having me.
It's
thank you
show,
for being. Yeah, sorry.
Thank
Thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone for listening.
See you later.
Bye.